This week on The Record, searching for solutions on the streets of St. Louis, what scattered dozens of juveniles from the scene of a deadly mass shooting, and why minors can legally carry guns under Missouri state law. Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft is on the record as he runs for governor. And can the feds step in to prosecute gun crimes? U.S. Attorney Sayler Fleming is on the record. Plus, House Democrat Sarah Unsicker is on the record as she runs for Attorney General. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Our top story this week, an all too common occurrence in modern America, the mayhem of a mass shooting and the madness in the aftermath. One 17-year-old teen is dead, another 17-year-old facing criminal charges, and 11 others, ages 15 to 19, were injured with gunfire or trampled trying to escape that scene. St. Louis Mayor Tashara Jones met the media and called for tougher gun laws on Father's Day Sunday.
Our problems don't stop at the Mississippi or Missouri rivers, and neither should our solutions. We also know that our state's lax gun laws make our challenge even more difficult. Despite a bipartisan push this session and the hard work of the St. Louis delegation, the Missouri legislature failed to restrict minors from carrying guns, a common sense solution to keep dangerous weapons out of the hands of children. The legislature's lack of action on gun safety laws encourages the proliferation of guns on our streets and puts our responding officers directly in harm's way.
Joining us now is Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft on the record, and also a leading Republican candidate for governor in Missouri. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
A tragedy happened earlier this week in the city of St. Louis, and I know that you've spoken some about public safety, but I think many voters might want to get a better idea how you think about these issues. Let's start here. Should you become governor of Missouri, would you be a one-size-fits-all governor, or would you recognize that some policies might fit better in different communities across the state?
I think it depends on the policy. There are certain things where, I believe in life. I want to protect all lives from conception to natural death. So there, it's a one policy. In other areas, I think you should have what works best for the community. It just depends on the data and the facts on the ground.
Well, one example might be you could walk down the rural dirt roads of Iron County with a long gun in your hand, a rifle, but should you be able to walk down the streets of urban St. Louis with an AR-15?
I don't see why it's a problem.
You don't?
No. The AR-15, the long gun, whatever it is, isn't the problem. The problem we have is with individuals. I mean, you look at this tragedy, and it was not a good thing. There are moms and dads, brothers and sisters that are in agony because of what happened. I think you have at least one individual that was killed. There was reports that another individual might be somewhat paralyzed from being trampled. That's horrendous. But what you had were individuals that were, let me see, it sounds like they broke the law to break into this building. It sounds like they were partying at 1 o'clock in the morning. They were both adults and youngish to middle-ish teenagers. I mean, there were countless laws that were broken. This isn't about a gun causing this. There were multiple guns recorded. Several people were shooting. All these people had no problem with shooting someone else.
At the time of this conversation, we still don't know exactly how they gained access into the building. There could have been breaking.
There are indications. We don't know for sure. That's true.
Police are still piecing some of that together. But let's look at the policy.
Not a whole lot good happens when you're out as a teenager at 1 o'clock in the morning.
My basketball coach used to say the same thing, and certainly there's some wisdom there. But I think what we want to get at is what can government do in policy making? Surely there are some folks who will break any and all laws. And I think that's part of the argument you're making. I don't know that it applies to everyone. You think laws do work, don't you?
I think laws can be helpful. I think we've seen the breakdown of law and order in St. Louis City, where criminals are not being charged, where criminals are not being put away, where we're letting criminals go, and we're essentially confining law-abiding citizens to their houses because they don't feel safe when they leave.
So let's look at this issue, because you have to be 19 years old to apply for a concealed carry permit in Missouri. But there's a catch. You don't actually have to have a concealed carry permit to carry a concealed weapon. Would you, in 2016 or 2017 when it took effect, would you have signed that bill into law that Governor Greitens did that dropped the requirement for a concealed carry permit?
Sure, I think that's in accordance with the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. And once again, I'd go back that this isn't about whether or not someone had a concealed carry permit or not. This was about individuals that were already breaking the laws. We need to enforce the laws we have, not write more laws that will get in the way of law-abiding officials, but do nothing to stop those individuals that will willingly and happily break the law from committing these atrocities.
I want to test that theory in
Sure.
a minute, but first I want to check in with something that Congresswoman Cori Bush said on Monday this week. She's calling on Republicans in Jefferson City to do more.
There's an assault weapons ban legislation. We want them to vote yes on it. There is legislation, we would love to see, and there's legislation out there, increase that federally, that limit the age limit on firearms from 18 to 21. Increase that number. We will save lives. When we talk about locally, there's so much that can be done locally in our state house, our state assembly that is not happening. Like, start that now.
Do you see any space at all for more proactive policing just to remove the guns from these dangerous scenarios? Is there any space for that proactive policing before the shooting starts?
Proactive policing, that can look different for different people. Police respond to crime, and we understand that. I don't believe that police should go around trying to stop people and trying to take guns from people. That is not, because we have enough problems with stop and frisk in this country, and so it can easily turn into something we do not want.
How do you evaluate those remarks from Congresswoman Bush?
I think they're very political. I think that she's not trying to actually solve the problem. If you look at what happened in the city of New York, which can be a great example for how you should do things, stop and frisk saved lives. Stop and frisk stopped crimes. It got criminals off the street, and it made it so law-abiding citizens could enjoy their city again. The idea that we want to make it illegal for people to have guns, but then we won't let the police stop people if they illegally have guns. That's so convoluted, I can't understand it.
But you don't, right now, the laws don't allow police to interject. Or when would a police officer actually approach a person legally in Missouri right now?
Well, if you look at stop and frisk laws that have been done in the past, the Supreme Court has set out guidelines that we could talk about at a later date if you want. It's a little bit technical as to what you can do to do that without invading the rights of individuals.
Under the example we used a minute ago, if you're carrying an AR-15 down the street, that wouldn't qualify.
That in and of itself, I don't think would be enough.
Or if you were 17 years old. Or 14 years old.
Why should we stop people just because they're 17-year-olds from walking down the street?
Well, if the law at one point said you had to be 19 to apply for a concealed carry permit, I think it stands to reason. The legislature said that's probably a reasonable age.
Well, there's always a difference between concealed carry and open carry, and you're saying we should stop someone for open carrying because they don't have a concealed carry permit? That doesn't make sense.
That's what leaders in St. Louis are deliberating right now, is whether or not they can do that. So it's an active question right now.
Well, look, as I've said before, the problem is not a lack of laws. The problem is a lack of law enforcement. The problem, frankly, some of it is a problem of values. How are we teaching our kids to respect life? Are we teaching our kids that going out and partying at 1 o'clock in the night with probably alcohol, quite possibly drugs, we don't know, and doing that with firearms is not a good thing to do. And it would appear, although we don't know, that they broke into the facility to do this. I mean, this is not something where more laws will solve the problem. They were violating laws already.
The chief of police in St. Louis disagrees with you. He says this.
It should be prohibited that juveniles do not carry guns. It should be prohibited. This is the first state and city that I come to where juveniles are not prohibited. It should at least mirror the federal law. So let's start there. And I think they tried to do that, and we had talked, and the mayor and I and her administration been down to Jeff City many times talking about the seriousness of this issue, and I think they tried to get it across, and the mayor hit on it, that they weren't able to do it this time. But we're going to keep pushing because we think it's too important to make sure that we at least start there, and I think that's reasonable.
Do you agree with Chief Tracy?
What federal law says that juveniles can't carry weapons?
The federal law passed in the 1960s, I believe. The firearms, I'm going to miss the acronym, but there's a safety act that says juveniles under the age of cannot possess weapons, cannot handguns here. Long guns they can, under adult supervision, under certain circumstances.
You've got me a little confused because you're talking about AR-15s, which are long guns, and now we're going to pistols. So it seems like it's a little bit of a moving
AR-15s were seen being carried down the street. The weapons involved in the recent shooting were handguns.
Okay.
And
Most of the time, if you look at crime statistics, it's not AR-15s.
Most of the
they
time
may
it's
be,
handguns.
quote, spooky-looking weapons,
Right.
but they don't cause problems. Look, am I the only one that sees that on one hand, we're saying we need more laws, but they were already violating the laws? Criminals don't follow the law by definition.
Well, lawmakers in Missouri say don't enforce federal gun laws here. So there's an obstacle, not cooperation.
Those people were already violating the law. The chief of police that you just quoted was saying all we need to do is pass another law. That's not working. These people were already violating.
I don't think he's saying.
He said that would be the first step or something.
Yeah.
But clearly these individuals were already violating the law. Murder is already against the law. Shooting a weapon, a firearm at someone with the intent to kill them or trying to kill them or in a reckless manner is already against the law. Breaking an entry is against the law. This isn't about firearms laws. This is about individuals that were seemingly hell-bent on violating the law, and they did that.
So you make the point that murder is already outlawed. And
it should be outlawed.
Thank you for clarifying. I hear that point. But to prosecute a murderer, you have to first catch them. Talk to any prosecutor. They will tell you the thing they need most to make their case is what? Evidence.
Well, in the city of St. Louis, we need a prosecutor that will prosecute crimes.
That's the whole issue.
And I'm glad that we have a new circuit attorney. But probably some of what we're seeing is from the laxity of the prosecuting attorney's office of not prosecuting crimes that had occurred previously. And I'd really be interested to see how many people that were involved in this incident should have been prosecuted for prior crimes and should have, in a reasonable society, been behind bars at the time of this occurrence.
All of those things are possible, but prosecutors and police.
Probable.
Prosecutors and police are likely to come to the legislature, and should you become governor, ask for your signature on pieces of legislation that would say, give us the tools we need to make this case, including and up to being able to track when weapons are sold, being able to track where they are. If weapons are used in the commission of a crime, shouldn't the state take an interest in knowing where that gun came from?
Look, once a gun as evidence is used in a crime, they're definitely going to do that.
Isn't it too late at that point? I am not in favor of some sort of overwatch surveillance, if you will, by the governments against law-abiding officials. We need to enforce the laws that we have. We need to put individuals that are criminals that have violated the law behind bars. We need to put the citizens of St. Louis City ahead of criminals. We've got to do that first. I always appreciate a conversation with you, especially because it gives our audience a peek behind the curtain into how you think about these important matters. One other big political thing happening in recent days is the second, not a state, but now a federal indictment of former President Donald Trump. I'm going to read you a quote from the former Attorney General that he appointed, Bill Barr. He said that this was, quote, entirely of his own making and, quote, not the result of unfair government prosecution. Many of our viewers may know your dad held that job at one point. Is Bill Barr right?
Unfortunately, look, Bill Barr has worked to honorably serve our government and our nation. Unfortunately, he seems blind to the fact that we have at least a two-tiered, if not a three-tiered system of justice in this country. And I think the onus is definitely on the Department of Justice to prove that they were going after a crime, not after an individual.
Well, certainly that's always the case. But can you
more so than ever. Look, the largest purveyor of disinformation and misinformation over the last 5 to 10 years has been the federal government. Our FBI, our security services have been part and parcel of that, and that strikes to the very heart of our nation, and we need to find a way to get past that and for people to be able to trust those systems again.
I want to make sure I'm hearing you clearly. Can you support a candidate for president who is under federal indictment?
I will vote for the best person I can, and if there is an indictment, that is the prosecutor saying what they say, we have to wait for the defense, we have to wait for the court, but as the old saying goes, look, you can indict a ham sandwich. So if it's that easy, then that would just say that Joe Biden can have anybody he wants indicted and he won't have to run against him. That's what happens in banana republics. That's not what should happen in the United States of America.
And we didn't even have time to get into the primary contest of this running for governor, but we do thank you for stopping by the studio.
Thanks for having me.
This next to respond, but first, up next on the record, the U.S. Attorney from Missouri's Eastern District on the role the federal government can play in securing the streets of St. Louis. That's next.
Get the content that matters to you on your time. Breaking news as it happens.
We are following breaking news at this hour.
Weather alerts when you need them. Live streams and newscasts on your schedule. On air, online, on our app, and on 5+. No matter where you go or how you watch, 5 on your side, focused on you.
What's the forecast in Florida?
What's it like in Belleville?
No matter where you are.
What's the forecast in St. Peter's?
Or how you get your weather.
We know you want the forecast for your backyard. And you want it now.
Right here and right now.
The 5 on your side, Weather First team. Focused on you.
Most people think this is St. Louis, but we know better. It's our neighborhoods, our people, and that's our focus. Because no story is bigger than the one that affects you. 5 on your side, focused on you.
We defer, especially with juveniles, to the state rules, and we honor those, and we hope to change those.
My question, though, is about the signal that stance sends to everyone listening to this press conference. Can you take action and push the envelope there?
We have arrested juveniles federally when they commit crimes, not just with a firearm alone, in possession with that. It's certainly something we've looked at in the past, and it's something we can do. And it's not out of the realm.
That was St. Louis Police Chief Robert Tracy, still somewhat new on the job, calling for Missouri lawmakers to mirror federal law that outlaws minors from carrying guns or bullets without adult supervision. But if that's already federal law, then how are kids getting away with it? U.S. Attorney Sayler Fleming joins us now from the Eastern District of Missouri. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Your office has a lot on its plate, from
It does.
prosecuting white-collar crime, corruption, drug charges, human trafficking, yes, gun smuggling across state lines. Do you have the bandwidth or even the legal grounds to accept criminal charges and prosecute firearm cases from local police?
So let me start by saying this, that addressing violent crime here in the Eastern District of Missouri, but especially in the St. Louis region, has been and will continue to be one of our top priorities. We have routinely prosecuted firearms cases both from the St. Louis City Police Department and the St. Louis County Police Department. In fact, I would say that that's the bulk of the cases, the type of cases that we prosecuted here locally.
For mere possession, or if someone uses that firearm in the commission of a violent crime?
Both. So we charge a bulk of felon in possession cases. We also charge a variety, quite a few actually, of carjacking cases, Hobbs Act robberies. Those are really commercial robberies, as well as drug-related murders. In fact, we prosecute more murder cases in the vast majority of districts in the country.
You've no doubt seen the trend. I don't know if some might tell you, some criminologists might tell you it peaked during or after COVID, but the trend of juveniles becoming more involved with violent crime, more involved in carjackings, and we've seen evidence of that in St. Louis. If a teen is caught carrying an illegal gun, and by just possessing it, they're violating federal law. And I can tell you there are dozens of teens carrying illegal guns around the streets of St. Louis in the last few weeks alone. What happens then if local police catch them, find the evidence on their person, refer that case to you? Can you prosecute it?
Well, the technical answer is yes. And to back up a little bit, our office does in fact prosecute juveniles federally. But we only do so in very egregious circumstances. Historically, what you would see is that we prosecute juveniles who have committed fatal carjackings. In other words, someone has been shot or killed during the course of a carjacking. When it comes to just the mere possession, while that is unlawful under federal law, it is very complicated under the federal system to prosecute that juvenile federally. There are two different mechanisms by which we can prosecute juveniles, and it's very complicated, but to give you a shorter version of that, we can either proceed against a juvenile under the Juvenile Delinquency Act as a juvenile, or we can seek transfer. In other words, very similar to the certification process in the state court system. In other words, we would ask the district court to certify this juvenile as an adult, and then we would proceed against that juvenile as an adult, just like any other defendant.
And you might not get that certification for 6, 9, 12 months or...
Oh, it can take upwards of a year or more.
And in the interim, the juvenile is where? On probation, at home?
Well, it depends. So if they have committed a violent crime, or what federal law defines as a violent crime, we would seek detention.
Mm-hmm.
That's very problematic in and of itself. First, there are no federal juvenile facilities.
So where do you put them?
Right. That's $1 million question. So we have to put them in a contract facility. Oftentimes those facilities are not even located in the state of Missouri. That's a problem. Not only, it's not the best thing for the juvenile's family, his or her counsel, and we as prosecutors in the court don't want that either.
I want to ask you, though, about a different policy question, because Missouri Governor Mike Parson just recently signed in the last few years the Second Amendment Preservation Act. Right now, a court has sort of stayed the implementation of that law pending further legal review, but I wonder, in a more practical sense, have you or prosecutors in your office seen any impact there? Has it made your jobs harder in some sense?
Yes, we have, and I would refer you, obviously the Department of Justice did file suit, and just to back up a little bit, the penalty mechanism for that is against any state or local law enforcement officers who enforce federal gun legislation. So someone can bring suit against them if they were to work with, collaborate, provide resources to the federal government enforcing gun laws in any way. And yes, we have seen, and that's fleshed out a little bit in the lawsuit, we have seen an impact because of that.
Are there any specific examples? Like, take for example this case we saw this last week. Should a police officer have encountered, or if some officer had encountered teens carrying these weapons that we've now seen in the images and tried to engage, maybe tried to even refer that case to you, would that have crossed the tripwire of...
It could have. It depends on, there are a variety of different interpretations of the Second Amendment Preservation Act. Thankfully, I would say locally, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department as well as the St. Louis County Police Department have continued to refer firearms cases to us, as well as crimes of violence involving firearms.
And so just to put a finer point on that, you've seen the impact in a reduced number of cases referred or less cooperation with local law enforcement? What are some examples?
I think some of the impact that we have seen has been in more of our rural areas, police departments that, maybe smaller police departments that are worried about the ramifications of working with us. I know that ATF, as that we said in the lawsuit, has had difficulty with some police departments entering gun information, trace reports, things like that, information into their systems, which makes it very difficult for us to do our jobs.
What should the message be from the Department of Justice, your office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, to any teens, young adults, people who are committing crimes of violence in St. Louis? What is your message to them?
So I want to say that I think the public doesn't fully understand what our office does when it comes to juveniles, and that is in large part because the statute requires that those proceedings and the related court records be under seal. But what I would say is that we do accept referrals from all police departments, but especially here in the city of St. Louis and in the county. And in those egregious situations, if we have a juvenile that has committed, like I said, a crime of violence, as defined under federal law, we will review that case and potentially prosecute it. And you will be prosecuted as an adult in that instance.
Is it fair to say your office has more tools to prosecute organized crime than local police have?
I think that, I don't know if we have more tools. I think that we work very, very closely. It's necessary that we work very closely with the local police departments. They are the ones that are on the street every day. They are the ones with the information and know who the players are in that organized crime.
And without giving specific details or compromising any investigations, of course, all those little disclaimers that go along with it, what is the extent to which juveniles might be acting at the behest of some larger organized crime or gang? We know that there are recruitment efforts that are seeping younger and younger. Is there a pathway for the feds to get at that, where if a juvenile is committing an act of violence on behalf of someone else, what can you do?
Absolutely, and I would say that in recent years we have seen at least a slight rise in adults using juveniles to commit violent crimes with the mistaken impression that they would somehow be insulating themselves from prosecution. But I can assure you that if we are able to prove that, we will prosecute those adults. And we actually there are mechanisms under federal law where we can seek enhanced penalties for situations in which adults are using juveniles to commit crimes.
All right, bringing some clarity to a confusing and complicated subject matter, U.S. Attorney Sayler Fleming, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
House Democrat Sarah Unsicker responds to Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft when we come back.
I'm Weather First meteorologist Tracy Hinson, and you're probably used to seeing me here every weekend with your latest forecast. But ever wonder what I do when the cameras are off?
I might just be headed to a school or youth group in your area. I show kids at all grade levels the power of science.
Look, we made a cloud. We talk safety and demystify the most terrifying of weather phenomena.
Getting students excited about science, technology, engineering, and math is incredibly rewarding. But the best part of all is knowing that the next 5 on your side meteorologists might just be in one of our classrooms, and I can't wait to meet them.
Welcome back. House Democrat Sarah Unsicker joins us now as she is in her primary campaign trying to win the nomination from the Democratic Party to run for Attorney General in 2024. It's good to have you with us.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Let's shift gears a little bit to this conversation we've seen renewed in St. Louis about violent crime. Is that going to be a part of your campaign?
Somewhat, yes. I mean, we need to do more about guns, and protecting kids and adults from gun violence. Over the weekend we saw all these kids shot when that shouldn't be happening. We should not be dealing with this kind of gun violence in the most prosperous country in the world.
The Secretary of State, though, just said that, the people pulling that trigger were already breaking laws. They weren't paying any attention to the fact that there's a law on the books, and that there are some folks, in his argument, that just aren't going to really look at the requirement for a concealed carry permit or how the age limit. They're going to blow that rule off too. Just one more law on the books that they pay no attention to. Is there some?
Yes, that's why we need preventative laws. We need laws that allow the police to look at people who are carrying and make sure they are legal to carry. We need laws that enforce that domestic violence, that people who are abusing their spouses or kids can't have guns.
Red flag laws.
Red flag laws.
And Florida passed those and enacted those.
Yes.
You'd like to see those here in Missouri, but even when these proposals are brought, for example, one to raise to make it a crime for a minor to openly carry or to conceal carry a weapon, there was a bill in the House, but
it failed. Yeah.
Didn't really get anywhere.
Right. We had bills in the House and amendments to prevent minors from carrying guns.
Is there a pathway to put a question like that on the ballot, you think, or would that fail in Missouri?
I think there is. We would need to explain it well to all voters in Missouri that this isn't about preventing hunting. This isn't about preventing culture in rural America. It's about keeping people safe and keeping kids in St. Louis safe.
All right, House Democrat Sarah Unsicker running for Attorney General. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We're back in just a moment. 1 year ago this Saturday, the U.S. Supreme Court shook the foundations of freedom for women to access abortion in America. Since then, 14 states have banned abortion outright, even in cases of rape and incest. 9 other states have implemented severe restrictions with limited exceptions. Those in nearly half of the states, but nearly 2/3 of OBGYNs polled recently have said it's made their jobs harder when they try to approach and treat pregnancy-related mortality. A series of protests and demonstrations are planned this weekend as advocates ramp up energy and organize political momentum heading into a presidential election year. And separately, many in our audience may know the name Tim Russert. He was the esteemed host of Meet the Press for many years before his untimely death in 2008. Next week, his son Luke Russert is on the record to preview his book, Look for Me There, Grieving My Father, Finding Myself. Of course, we look forward to that discussion with the former NBC News political reporter who left his post covering the campaign trail in late 2016 of all times. Thanks for joining us on our first program at this new time of 12:30. Until next week, we're off the record.